Hi guys, we are at MacBinge podcast number 4, and we are talking about Act 1, Scene 4 here. Now, the really important thing I want you to remember is that you need to have read the scene in detail before watching this. I'm just going to be picking out individual lines, okay? And if you haven't read the scene in detail, they may not make complete sense to you. So if you haven't done that yet, pause, read this scene. It's not that long. And then come back to it. You also need the script in front of you. You need to be able to highlight and annotate. Okay, so we're talking about scene 4 here. Macbeth has just been given the prophecy. Whoop, my computer's going a bit crazy. Macbeth has been given the prophecy there, and he is thinking about it, but do remember from that last scene that he came to the conclusion that if this was true, he wouldn't need to act. If chance or fate is going to make him king, it's going to do it without him doing anything anyway, all right? So, we move to scene 4, Forest, the Palace. This is the first scene that doesn't open with either thunder, lightning, or alarms and battle sounds, okay? So we finally get a moment of peace in this play, or only at scene 4. We have flourish. So the war has been won. We're at Forest, and we're at the king's main kind of ground, and there's King Duncan, Malcolm and Donalbain, his sons, and all the other attendants that need to be there. Okay, they all show up, and there's a sense of victory about the place with this flourish. Duncan opens up with a reminder about the execution of Cawdor. Are those in commission not yet returned? And so we get this this introduction here. Let me just see exactly where we are. There's a little reference to what happened with Cawdor from Malcolm, his son here. He talks about Cawdor having died. There's a couple of lines about how he frankly confessed his treasons, and he implored pardon and all of these sorts of things. But in the end, nothing in his life became him like the leaving it, which is a great line. And he was completely repentant in his death, apparently. He was sad. He said, I should never have done this. I should never have turned against the king. And Duncan replies, there's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. What does this mean? He says it's not difficult. There's no art to it. There's no complexity to it. That's what he means when they say there's no art. To see what is going on in people's minds when you look at their face. Duncan thinks that it's quite easy to tell what people think by looking at them. Okay? And he says this in reference to the fact that they could see that Cawdor looked truly repentant before he died. There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. This is, of course, ridiculous, because we've had Cawdor already turn on him. Duncan is shown here to be, while a lovely king and a nice guy, a bit naive, okay? He is a bit too trustworthy. And he even says here, he was a gentleman on whom I built an absolute trust, talking about the old Thane of Cawdor here. It shows again that Duncan is perhaps a little bit too trustworthy. Now, too trusting, rather, of people who aren't trustworthy. So, to think the best of people, to be trusting, these are usually good qualities. But in this situation, in times of rebellion, perhaps it was not. Now, enter Macbeth, Banquo, Ross, and Angus, just coming over from the previous scene. Note here how grateful Duncan is to Macbeth. Oh, worthiest cousin! The sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. Thou art so far before that swiftest wing of recompense is slow to overtake thee. So he's saying, I should have shown my gratitude so much more in the past. I should have been so grateful. What can I say to possibly thank you? Only I have left to say, more is thy due than more than all can pay. You deserve more than anything I can give you. Now, there's a bit of dramatic irony here because we know in the audience what Macbeth has just been told, and we kind of think, well, Macbeth's going to get more than you ever imagined at this point. But it also shows how gracious a king Duncan is. He's not arrogant, he's not full of himself, and it serves to make his coming death so much more cruel. Here we see a king who is really gracious towards his subjects. He's really thankful, he really respects them, and he commands a lot of respect because of it. And Macbeth shows this. He says, "The service and the loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself." And I think what's interesting here is that while Macbeth has been told about this possibility of himself becoming king, and while his ambition has been stoked, he still respects Duncan. He has always respected Duncan. And there's also some lines here about people knowing their place in the recognition of kind of the order of things, the natural order of things. He says, "Your Highness's part is to receive our duties, and our duties are to your throne and state children and servants, which do but what they should by doing everything safe towards your love and honour." He's saying that's our place. Our place is to serve you, and we are happy to serve you. But we know what's going on in Macbeth's mind. We know the machinations that have been put there by the witches. We know that he's already started to imagine Duncan's murder in his head, that he's already started to think about the grim, horrific things that he might do to become king. Which renders Duncan's line earlier, "There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face," even more naive. Because here, Macbeth suddenly appears and starts saying, "Oh, I respect you so much, you're so wonderful, blah, 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 blah." But there's something going on in the back of his mind that Duncan doesn't know about. And so a really key theme is introduced here, which is appearance versus reality. How characters appear and what they show versus the reality of their inner thoughts and what they really think. That runs through a lot of this play. Okay? And we'll see how that happens later on. Now, Duncan continues to say nice things to them, obviously. He's very happy. He says to Macbeth, and I find this really interesting, "I have begun to plant thee, and will labour to make thee full of growing." So he's already given Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor. He has started to give Macbeth good things for all the hard work he's done in the battles and everything like that. And he's going to work hard to raise Macbeth's status. And there's an implication here, and Shakespeare's audiences would have picked up on it, that if you are loyal to the king, good things will come to you. Note how that contrasts with the line in Act 1, Scene 2, "The multiple villainies of nature do swarm upon him." Okay? There's a suggestion there that if you rebel and do evil things come upon you. And here, if you know your place in the natural order of things and you serve your king well, he will do well by you. Good things will come upon you. Okay? Now, Banquo is very gracious. "There, if I grow, the harvest is your own." So, you know, they're sharing really nice things with one another. And then Duncan turns to everybody and says something that's not hugely surprising, but is important in terms of succession. He announces, in this situation, now that the rebellion is over and things have calmed down a little bit, he announces, "We will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm, whom we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland, which honour must not unaccompanied invest him only." So Duncan is announcing to everyone, 100% for sure, that he is naming Malcolm, his eldest son, the successor to the throne, should anything happen to him. It would have been assumed that succession would likely go in this direction anyway, but Duncan's proclamation just really determines it. Everyone there knows if anything happens to Duncan, there is no bandying about the matter. Malcolm, who is now Prince of Cumberland, becomes King of Scotland. This obviously is not the best news for Macbeth, who himself wants to be King of Scotland, or has it in his mind. So later on, you'll notice that he says, "Ah, the Prince of Cumberland. That is a step on which I must fall down or else overleap, for in my way it lies." Did we not just have Macbeth in scene 3 say, "If chance will crown me, then chance may have me king without my stir"? Did he not just say, "I'm not going to be involved. If fate will make me king, fine, but if it doesn't, it doesn't"? And then now, being confronted with Malcolm being proclaimed as the successor, he then says, "Malcolm, the Prince of Cumberland, that's a step on which I must fall down or else overleap, for in my way it lies." He's suddenly seen an obstacle and he's just thinking, right, I need to get past that. I need to defeat that obstacle. Because this, once again, is who Macbeth is. He's a man of action. He has just been, he can't, I think one of the difficult things to think about in Macbeth's character is he is a great warrior. He is an almighty warrior. But people who do well in war don't necessarily do well in peace. And Duncan has shown him here, with the line previously, "I have begun to plant thee, and will labour to make thee full of growing," that if he can know his place and just enjoy a happy, peaceful life in peacetime, he will prosper. He will do really, really well. But Macbeth is a man of war. He has been given a new site to set his eyes on, which is becoming king, and he's just been presented with an obstacle. And what does a man of war do when they're presented with an obstacle? They fight. And so here, presented with the obstacle of the proclamation of Malcolm as successor, he thinks, right, I've got to do something about this. So his whole, I'm not doing anything, I'm just going to wait and see what happens, is out the window, and it really has not taken much. And I think this says quite a lot about Macbeth's character and the sort of person that he is. Some other little things to pick out on language-wise in this scene. The use of the imagery of stars. He talks about when Duncan names Malcolm as his successor, he says, "Signs of nobleness like stars shall shine on all deservers." So we have this idea of stars being something that shine and light everything up around us. Whereas Macbeth also uses stars himself. And this is an aside, so he's not talking to anyone but the audience here when he says that, talks about the Prince of Cumberland being an obstacle. He says, "Stars, hide your fires. Let not light see my black and deep desires." So he's saying that actually he wants the stars to turn in and not see the deep desires that he has inside. Once again, this is a reference back to Duncan's proclamation earlier in the scene where he says that there is no art to finding the mind's construction in the face. And Macbeth is showing us here, actually, we've just been exchanging compliments with each other for a while, but in my head, I have black and deep desires. But he almost doesn't want to admit it to himself. He says, "The eye wink at the hand," as in, I don't want my eye to see what my hand is about to do. I almost just want to act without thinking about it. Yet let that be which the eye fears when it is done to see. So let's just act and then not think about it later. He's feeling a lot of guilt here. Because at the end of the day, he does respect Duncan. At the end of the day, he does love Duncan. And some performances of Macbeth have actually shown them to be almost like father and son in a lot of ways. The amount of respect that comes back and forth between Duncan and Macbeth in this scene is huge. And so Macbeth has these black and deep desires that he now admits to himself. And he's struggling to face them. And he's struggling to show them even to himself, let alone to anyone else. So what does this scene do? This scene shows us that, one, what people say and how people appear is not necessarily what they think. Two, it shows us that Duncan is a lovely, wonderful, gracious king. But unfortunately, in times of difficulty and distrust, that ends up making him a bit naive, and it means he can be exploited. We also see that Macbeth is moving into action here. Macbeth has gone from his kind of, oh, I'll just sit back and see what happens, to, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. And leads us into the following scenes. The last little plot point as well is that from hence to Inverness and bind us further to you, we see that Duncan and everybody else are all going to Macbeth's castle now, because it's one of the nearest castles from where the battle is, and they're going to go and they're going to spend the night at Macbeth's castle. And Macbeth says, let me go ahead and tell my wife that I am coming. I'm going to humbly take my leave. I got to go prepare my castle for you guys, so that it's all, it's all great and happy and welcoming for a king arriving. So it's an interesting scene. It's a scene where motivations are complicated and made more complex, and it's a scene that really highlights the difference in between a character like Duncan, who is really set up to be a great king, and a character like Macbeth, who is troubled with these black desires, who is lying and not admitting what's going on inside his head. We see surprisingly little of Banquo in this scene, but Banquo will return to us later.